Good morning, Broncos fans. As we are getting all the live streams connected, I'd just like to say whether you're in the Mountain Time Zone or somewhere around the world, if you're watching the show, you're Broncos fans. And we're all connected by that fandom, a tribe of Broncos fans. So thank you for joining the show. And good morning again. I'm your host, Thomas Hall, bringing you Legends of Mile High, which is a podcast that blends Denver Broncos current events with a historical perspective. And the ultimate goal is always to keep the storied history of the franchise alive, even in the minds of the most recent of fans. And as always, again, we will conclude the show with Mile High Legend, which is a interesting story of Broncos of the past. And today I'll end the show with the saga of Elvis Dumerville and the fax machine, but with a twist. There's a small detail that is missed that could have changed the outcome. So if that piques your curiosity, stay with me till the end. And please hit the like button and also be sure to subscribe to the Mile High Huddle YouTube channel. And as always, if you can't wait until Fridays for my football takes, follow me at Thomas Hall NFL and check out some content at milehighhuddle.com for more in-depth analysis. So today we are going to be talking about some roster battles coming out of minicamp that have some large roster implications. When training camp rolls around, you really want to keep your eye on these roster battles. So before we get started, I just want to jump into the chat. The DWI guys coming in with a super chat. Thank you so much. You're a great supporter of the show. I always love to hear your comments when you're in here. You're great Broncos fan, so thank you very much. Have a great show, Thomas, and Broncos Country Duty Calls. We'll watch later. Well, thank you. It'll be up as soon as this is over, so please enjoy later today. Thank you very much for joining from London. Dale Fleming's coming in. Good afternoon, Ethan. Good morning, Thomas, Scott, and Broncos Country. Well, good morning to you, Dale. Thank you for joining. I really appreciate it. Mark Hoynak. Good morning, Broncos Country. Well, good morning to you, Mark. Kathy, good morning, fam. Good morning to you. Good morning, EJ. Always coming in. You're a dedicated viewer of the show, so thank you very much. Good morning, Thomas and Broncos Country. Don Jamarillo. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Maybe it's Hamarillo. I'm sorry. I probably butchered it twice, but good morning, Thomas, Scott, Broncos Country. Dumerville was such a threat. He was a badass. DB4L, Denver Broncos for life. Yes, thank you. It's coming in with from Facebook. I appreciate it. I've not seen you on here before, so I really appreciate you coming in, supporting the show. I hope you're going to enjoy the Elvis Mile High Legend a little bit later in the show to finish it off. And it's a fun one, something that people just tend to overlook that could have saved some time. So thank you for joining, and thank you if you're the first time viewer of the show. So let's just jump in real quick here to some of these roster battles. So oftentimes there have been, in Broncos history, there have been some pretty big roster battles where the incumbent has surprisingly lost the battle, not always cut, but became a kind of a lackluster contributor to the team. So I'll go back to 1999, for instance. So that was the year after John Elway retired. And Bubby Brister was the incumbent. But and people thought he was going to be a great quarterback for the team because he filled in that 1998 Super Bowl run where the Broncos went 14-2, looked unbeatable for the most part. He played 4 games incredibly well. In fact, some fans back then, I don't know why, were calling for him to be the starter instead of Elway after those 4 games. So it was looking like, the Broncos were going to roll again. Most of the other parts of the team were intact, but Bubby Brister lost the starting job to Brian Greasy that year, and that was a huge surprise in preseason. And Bubby really didn't play much. He came in a couple times, but he was inactive for several games that year. So that was a huge surprise. And then there have been a couple others, but the other big one that was interesting, which led to 2,000-yard season, couple Super Bowls, which was in 1995. The Broncos had brought in Rod Bernstein from the Chargers, who was a converted tight end, and all hopes were resting on Bernstein being a great running back. He had been in a part-time role with the Chargers and looked like he was going to be, a new running back contributor for the Broncos. He'd been there a couple of years and was doing fairly well. And then, of course, Terrell Davis came on the scene, and that was it for Rod Bernstein. He was with the team for only a couple games, and then was gone, really. So you never know what's going to happen in these training camp battles. So I'm going to talk about a few of them that I think you have to keep an eye on. These are some serious roster considerations where somebody may be cut from the team or traded. And the first one I'm going to talk about is Baron Browning versus Malik Reed. Now, I know that Browning got moved to edge. It was a bit of a curious decision. A lot of people have been talking about that, me as well. Talked with Carl Mecklenburg a couple weeks ago about it. But if Baron Browning wins that backup role to Randy Gregory and Bradley Chubb, they're not going to get rid of their second round pick, Nick Benito. There's only going to be 4 spots on that roster, most likely. So if Browning takes that job, you're going to see Reed probably with another team. And it's a shame because Reed has been a pretty solid backup for a couple of years. I mean, when Von Miller went down with injury for the whole year in 2020, he was a sack leader. He had 8 sacks. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with that battle. If Reed ends up beating Baron Browning out for that backup role, you may see a change in attitude of where Browning should play. He may end up going back to inside linebacker or playing some other kind of hybrid role where he's not playing as much. And that'll be a very interesting battle to watch. People have been talking about, coaches and whatnot have been talking about how Browning looks really good coming off the edge. It's going to be hard to unseat Reed, but when in the NFL, youth really kind of rules for the most part. That's why players have a 3-year lifespan in the NFL on average. So it's a good thing to get some youth coming in, but I think that's going to be a big one to watch come training camp. And preseason. So definitely keep your eye on that one. The other one is Quinn Miners and Graham Glasgow. That's a big one too. And I know Glasgow just changed his contract to kind of stay on the team, took a pay cut, and so it kind of upped his cap hit if they release him. But he may be a trade candidate in this situation. The reason why I say that is if Miners can take that right guard position from Glasgow, I mean, you may see Glasgow shift over to center, possibly but by all reports, also we're seeing Lloyd Cushenberry is really coming on strong, doing a great job in these mini camps and OTAs. So it'll be interesting to watch this battle, but my guess is whoever wins it, if Miners wins it, Glasgow's probably going to be either cut or traded. They're not going to pay that much money to a backup, especially when they have brought in some very versatile players that have experience. Is even experience within within Nathaniel Hackett's offense. They're going to be able to play that backup role, versatility, be able to slide from guard to guard and sometimes to tackle. So they don't need a really strong veteran presence from Glasgow. Now, if Miners doesn't win it, he's got a very important role. I mean, they're not going to get him. He's going to be the future at guard down the road, if it's not this year for sure. So you'll see him being that versatile backup that the team uses at either guard position or if need be that center position as well if injuries happen. So that's another interesting one to watch, and I'm going to be watching that one when preseason rolls around for sure. It's nice that we're going to be able to see all the Broncos games live on NFL Network, which is a plus. So that's great. Now, The next one that I really want to talk about, which is going to be interesting as well, because there's a veteran who has had some injury issues, and that's Mike Purcell. I mean, he got that contract a couple of years ago, very deservedly so, but he's had health issues, and he hasn't been able to be on the field as much. I think when he's healthy, he is a beast against the run. But it's going to be a competition for one of those spots between Mike Purcell, Deshaun Williams, and McTelvin Agim. And they all kind of bring something different to the table, in my opinion. I mean, Purcell's a solid run stuffer. Agim is definitely more of he's got a lot of pass rush potential. So when you're looking at them uh, in that regard, they're very different. But and Deshaun Williams kind of got a little bit of combination between both, and he's kind of coming on. I mean, last year I watched him play. He when he came and filled in, he was a solid player, and they brought him back this year probably for that reason, because they saw that he was a good player, and he didn't get a contract somewhere else, so they brought him back this year. Those three players will be fighting for probably two roles, because the Broncos aren't going to get rid of their fourth round draft choice. He looks promising. He brought in DJ Jones to be that force in the middle. Draymond Jones, I think, is going to have a huge year this year. He's been on the verge of really taking off. If he can just finish his pass rush, you're going to see some pretty good sack numbers out of him. So there's really only a couple positions left on that rotation. And I really think the Broncos are looking to the future. They've brought in some young players. They've drafted a couple defensive line players, two this year, and one last year. They brought in a 7th rounder. I think that's a big one to watch. So my guess is either one of these players can be cut or traded. And that's a shame, because they got a 3rd round draft choice invested in McTelvin. That would really hurt to get rid of him. Unfortunately, that's the name of the game in the NFL. If you can't perform, then you get your shot for a couple years, and then they move on. So Dale Fleming coming in. Thank you for the comment. What I remember about Bubby losing the starter's job is that Bubby was taking it easy in training camp and preseason, assuming the job was already his. Well, we'll go back to what we were talking about earlier. That I don't know if that's true or not. I don't remember that. But I'm getting older now, so my memory is not as good. I think that could possibly be it. I mean, he's a backup. He started a few times through his career, but he was really mostly a backup. So maybe he didn't understand what it really took to take that starter's job back when it came around off season. So that's a great comment. I appreciate that, Dale. That's not a take that I've seen, but I do know that Greasy just flat out outplayed him in preseason. I'm from my perspective, when I was watching those games, it really wasn't even close. Now you could say that Brian Greasy got the advantage by coming in later in the games, in those preseason games where you have a lot of the players that aren't going to be on any team come, cut down day in September. So you could say that he had a bit of an advantage. He looked better because he was playing against, players that really weren't that great compared to what Bubby Brister was playing against. But yeah, I mean, it was so lopsided that Shanahan had to make that decision. Now, I like Brian Greasy. He's a Bronco of the past, and he had an incredible season. He had one incredible season. But he was one of those guys that he couldn't get the team over the hump. He was good enough to keep you kind of in competition, but not good enough to get you to the Super Bowl. I don't know if Bubby Brister had gotten that starting job, how it would have turned out. And we may never have known. I mean, the unfortunate thing really was Greasy threw that fateful interception that, Terrell Davis ended up getting his knee hurt on, and that was the end of Terrell Davis's career. So there was a lot of implications for the Broncos, coming off that back-to-back Super Bowl, hoping to be, kind of a perennial Super Bowl contender. And, when Terrell Davis went down, they had an awful season and he just couldn't come back from that injury. So, there's Broncos fans there's a definitely love-hate relationship with Brian Griese, I think, in that regard. But he's a solid player, but it would have been nice to see what Brister could have done. Who knows what would happen? Maybe, he's not a great practice guy, and during the games it would have been better. But oh well, that's water under the bridge. Uh, but it was definitely an interesting battle to watch, and I think that these battles are not going to be as in the spotlight because they're not quarterback position. But these battles that I'm talking about in training camp are going to be huge for these players, and I think that they're really going to make each other a lot better. And frankly, with these battles is a good sign. I mean, there's some weaknesses on this Broncos roster, but these battles that I'm talking about are highlighting some great depth. If the starters can play really well and stay healthy, and we can see these other backups come in to spell those starters in a rotation, I think it's going to be. It shows the depth on this team. I think the depth on this team is maybe better than last year. I thought the last year's depth was pretty solid. I mean, we watched many people go down last year to injury, and they were still fairly solid on the defensive side of the ball anyway. So I think we watch these, and I think we're going to be happy to see whoever wins these battles. I think Mike Purcell, he's a candidate to maybe be traded if he doesn't get that starter role. I think he's going to win it. Actually, if he can stay healthy, I think he's going to win that job. I'll say that it's probably going to be Purcell and Williams that stick around. I think they're going to part ways with the game. I just don't see, he just hasn't put it all together. So, but we'll see about that. And I'm anxious to watch it because who knows? I mean, this may be his year. He may turn it around. You may see some great pass rush in preseason that really catches the coach's eye from a game. So he's got a lot of potential in that area. And when he was filling in last season, you could see it. You could see that pass rush potential. And I don't know if it was Fangio and that regime that wasn't giving him more opportunity, or if he just wasn't performing in practice enough to get that opportunity. But I think he's got some potential for sure. And then the final battle, which isn't a huge like starter implication or anything like that, but I think it's one to watch. And that's PJ Locke versus De'Aaron Turner-Yell. I think that we've got two players that are very similar in size, but you've got a rookie that's faster than Locke, a little bit bigger, a little bit more athletic. Locke has been a great special teams performer, and he's come in on defense a couple times, but there's one position left. I mean, you've got Justin Simmons. He's not going anywhere. They brought Kareem Jackson back. He's definitely another starter. And then you got last year's kind of rookie sensation that Caden Stearns came in and played amazingly well. And they typically carry 4 safeties. It's possible that they'll decide to carry 5, and I don't know. It's going to be a tough one to see. But by all accounts, coming out of minicamp, Turner-Yell is just having an excellent camp. I've seen interceptions reported. He's playing really well on defense. If he can put it together and make an impact on special teams, I just don't see why they would keep Locke around. I like PJ Locke. I think he's played well, but like I said earlier, the youth movement is key in the NFL. So what these really tell us is that the Broncos are going to have some pretty good depth in spots. There's going to be some really strong battles making everybody better. And I think the Broncos are really set up, for the next few years at these spots, because they've got some good youthful players who look like they could really progress and become solid forces. Now, that's all speculation, of course. You never know with these draft picks if they're really going to pan out or not. And you also have to take some of the stuff that coaches say with a grain of salt in minicamp. They talk about, oh, this person looks great this year, and this person looks great this year, and then the next thing you know, they're not on the team anymore. So who knows what the motivation for saying those, those type of comments to the media about different players. Are they trying to get them motivated? Are they trying to drum up some hopeful trade discussions? You never know, but we'll be able to see it on screen come preseason, and definitely keep an eye on those particular roster battles in preseason. So, okay, we've got another comment here. Herbicide 73. I've not seen this one. I've not seen you on here before, so thank you. If you're a Broncos fan joining in, like I said earlier, we're all connected by that fandom, so I appreciate people jumping in here with these chats. So you guys need to extend Russ ASAP. That guy's going to be more expensive, especially if you win with him. Yeah, it would be nice. I don't know if he's going to do that right now. I mean, either way, whatever extension, if we do it, if we see the Broncos do it now or do it next season, is going to be a massive contract. He, especially, when he comes out, we all know how he can play. We've seen it. I know there's speculation that he's on the downside of his career, and Seattle Seahawks fans are like saying, yeah, he's terrible now. He had a bad year last year, it's not true. He's going to be expensive no matter what. If we do it, if we see the Broncos do it this year or next year, I imagine it's going to be the same thing, because he knows what he's worth. He's seen all the contracts going out there from these other quarterbacks that have not had the career he's had, and he's still young. So, I mean, as a quarterback in today's, if this was 1990, I'd be worried about Russell Wilson, but it's not. Rules protect the quarterback, and he's taken a beating really. In Seattle, they just did him no service by having the lines that they've had. He's taken a beating, and he's only missed 3 games. And it's not really, when you think about the quarterback position, or even any position in the NFL, as you get older, it's not necessarily the old injuries that come back. Now, Peyton Manning was different. That was quite a substantial injury to his neck, and so you could kind of see him it affecting him later in his career in 2015. But most of it is the recovery. When you're older, it takes so much longer to recover from injuries, or even just regular practice. So I'm not really worried about the beating he's taken before. I'm worried about going forward. And I think the Broncos have put a line together, and will continue to put a line together that will be one of the best he's had in his career. I don't see him getting hit as much. I see that he's going to be easier to recover game in and game out. There's always freak injuries that happen. Knock on wood that won't happen to Russell Wilson. But I think either way, it's going to be an expensive endeavor. But the nice thing about the NFL salary cap is it keeps going up. So in 3 years, his contract will be one of the largest we've seen for a quarterback. But in 3 years, his it'll look like a great deal. So that's just the way the NFL works, the way the salary cap works. So. Dale Fleming, thank you for jumping here again. I don't know much about PJ Locke. Is he not young? He is young. He's been in the league for 2 years. I don't know his age. I can look that up real quick. Let me look it up. But he's definitely not youthful as the rookie coming in. Let me get his age here. I know he's taken a while to catch on. Coming in, he wasn't one of those early rounds rookies that he had to really work hard. I think he was an undrafted free agent. He is, let's see, he's 25. He'll be 26 after this season's over. So he's still young, but you have to consider that players start to age quickly in the NFL, some of them, and around 27, 28, they hit their peak, and then they start to decline. So bringing in a rookie as for a backup role, if PJ Locke was a starter, this would be kind of a different story, but this is a backup role. And you get that youth movement coming in with somebody who basically is the same size, faster, a little more athletic. I think you're going to see the youth movement in that position. But again, PJ Locke may have a great camp and a great preseason, and I don't think they'll be able to stash Turner Yell on the practice squad. There's been too much hype about him this offseason, so it's one of those things where you're not going to be able to, if you cut him, he's going to catch on somewhere else. So that's a big decision that they're going to have to make coming up. EJ, thank you for coming again. Thank you for being a great supporter of the show. I've seen you on here, I think, every morning. So thank you for that. I know it's early to get up. Hopefully, not as early for you, depending on where you're at. So the comment is, hopefully KJ Hamler and Jerry Jeudy can stay healthy this year. We need their skill sets in this offense to offset the bigger receivers in Tim Patrick and Cortland Sutton. Let's ride. Yes, they'll both need to stay healthy. I think that the Broncos 4 receivers, when you got Patrick, Sutton, Jeudy, and Hamler, are going to be some of the best in the NFL if they can stay healthy. I think you're going to see Sutton being considered for an all-pro this year. He's another year away from that injury. He was really coming on in his second year. He's a 50-50 ball stud. Patrick is reliable. And then you've got Jeudy, one of the best route runners. You're going to see a better quarterback play and probably a better offensive fit for him. And then KJ Hamler, I mean, he's still kind of recovering. He's looking pretty good. He's going to be a field stretcher. I think the nice thing about having those 4, and that you saw it last year, you saw George Payton and even Fangio. They were kind of massaged that roster with the new practice squad rules, where they kept only 5 receivers so they could fill in somewhere else. And I think that was smart, because they brought 3 receivers onto the practice squad, so you can call those receivers up, or any player up from the practice squad with all the new rules pretty easily, and then kind of get them back on the practice squad. So I think you might see that they only carry 5 again this year, and that 5th one being the kick returner in Washington. I think he's going to win that kick returner job. So I think you're going to see all 4 of those. They're going to be fighting definitely for production with because there's 4 really good receivers, but you're going to see some of the best years out of these guys. I think you're going to see Sutton really take off, and Jeudy as well. And Patrick's been solid. So, I mean, I don't know what else he can do. He may have a better year, but he may have a similar year, but it's going to be a solid year, because, there's going to be all of those other people competing for those passes. So I think you'll see less to the tight ends maybe, and you'll see a lot of wide receivers. It's going to be a high flying offense. It's going to be fun. And Russell Wilson brings that excitement to the team. So I think we're going to see some really fun offense that we have not seen for a couple of years in Broncos, in the Mile High City. So EJ coming back in. Thomas, do you think Glasgow makes the move to starting center over Cushenberry, who struggles? I've talked about that. It has been, that's been the rumor. It's possible. And depending on whether the coaches are really telling us straight or not, it sounds like Cushenberry is having a great offseason. His OTAs and, in the mini camp, all reports saying he's doing great. So it's hard to say. I thought Glasgow would jump over to center, because I didn't think Cushenberry was a great fit for the wide zone scheme that they're going to be running. And you can talk about how great, when you're looking at mini camps, it's not a full on, 11 on 11 where you're going against another team, things like that. So that can change, when you're doing 1-on-1s or you're doing 7-on-7, players can look better, but when the live rounds start firing in game, you may see that he struggles with that wide zone scheme, and you may see Glasgow slide over. And if Miners does beat Glasgow out, you may see that anyway, depending on what the coaches want to do. But that'll be a fun one to watch. I'm going to be watching the offensive line, because I think that Risner and Bowles, and if Billy Turner wins that role, all are a great fit for the zone blocking scheme. And I also think, there's one that my surprise player that I think we'll see at right tackle maybe is Calvin Anderson. He's improved incredibly well, and I think he's a good fit for that zone blocking scheme too. So I think they have a ton of options on the offensive line. Turner can slide into guard, so you may see some shifting around come preseason. So we'll see. We'll see what happens, but I'm definitely tuned into these preseason games. I'm glad we'll be able to watch them on NFL Network. They'll be great seeing all the Broncos preseason games. FC Donnelly, a newcomer. Thank you for dropping in. I've not seen you on here before, but I really appreciate you coming in with this. Sounds like Russell loves Kush. That may be true. He may, that's the big influence too. So, depending on what Russell Wilson's comfortable with, but I think, in the end, he can get comfortable with any center really. So I don't know. I don't know. From what I've seen from Cushenberry, he's a good power, kind of smash mouth type player. We'll see if he can. All these guys are super athletic, so we'll see what he can do. But I think it's going to be fun to watch either way. And I think that they did a great job of bringing in players that may be short-term players, but really filling in this year as they start to kind of bring in more draft picks and start to build out a long-term future for that offensive line. And they have to find a right tackle. Been looking for a right tackle for what seems like a decade. In fact, I think, ever since Orlando Franklin left back then, that they've been searching for a really solid right tackle. So I think they've done a good job of bringing in a mix of veterans who can play with versatility, and they've got a full-on battle at right tackle that's going to go on. But again, you might see Calvin Anderson. That's my surprise player for this year. I think you're going to see him make some noise this year. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But all right. Well, thank you for all the comments. I'm going to just one quick announcement, and I apologize for this, but I'm going to be traveling next Friday, so I'm not going to be able to do the show. So there's not going to be Legends of Mile High next week. And so I apologize for that. But I do have something I think is going to be fun. So I have a little project. If you guys want to participate, listeners, anybody who wants to jump in here, I want to really talk about players who played in the past in a different era, who were pretty good players. But if they played today's game, they would be great players. In fact, could be even Hall of Fame caliber type players, or players that were really nice players back then that, for the Broncos is what I'm talking about specifically, who could, if they were a nice player back then, who would be really good in today's game. And I'm giving you 2 weeks to kind of think about this. I have a few that I think really would benefit with playing in today's game. And you can't pick like John Elway. Everybody knows that if he played in today's game, it would be, he'd be incredible. Just like many of the other quarterbacks, Dan Marino, Warren Moon, things like that. But, think about players who, put your thinking caps on. Think about some players that are good back then that could be great in this year. So now I'm going to wind down the show. Like always, I'm going to conclude with the Mile High legend. So here we go. Nearly every Broncos fan alive has heard of the saga of Elvis Dumerville and the fax machine. I mean, it is an embarrassing moment in the NFL and NFL history, and one that is joked about nearly every free agency period. And there were several mistakes that happened in this often ridiculed event. And if they could have changed some of those events, they could have saved the day. But there's one detail that nobody mentions in these what if scenarios. And it's a small mistake that could have kept Elvis in the Mile High City, even if all those other events played out just exactly the same. And losing a star player of Dumerville's caliber due to a fax machine really hurt. He was an incredible force off the edge, and he combined with Von Miller to create the Doom and Gloom team. And he had really had an interesting story to start his NFL career. I mean, Dumerville was an elite pass rusher in college, but he wasn't drafted until the 4th round. And that's because teams were worried about his height. And even though Elvis had 20 sacks and 22 tackles for a loss in his final season in Louisville, teams worried he was too short to win against these massive 6'6" NFL offensive tackles. And even the Broncos, the team who drafted him, had doubts because Shanahan lined him up at defensive tackle instead of defensive end to start his first season. And he's thinking that he could win against guards. But then Shanahan realized why Elvis was such a great pass rusher, even with his diminutive height. Now, even though he was 5'11", which is much shorter than the standard at edge rusher, his arms were as long as those of a much taller person. In fact, his arms are longer than the number 2 overall pick in this draft, Aiden Hutchinson, who stands 6'7". So the leverage from his shorter height and long arms really created nightmares for offensive tackles when he finally got a shot to rush from the edge in the NFL. In his first full season at edge rusher, he had 12.5 sacks, and he finished his career with 105.5 sacks, which was enough to lead all Broncos at the time of his retirement. But unfortunately, he finished his career with the Broncos with only 63.5 sacks due to the fax machine fiasco. So what happened? In 2013, the Broncos front office wanted to renegotiate Dumerville's contract to lower his base salary so they could get some salary cap relief. And negotiations stalled until the day of the deadline, like it often happens. And in a situation like this, when the deadline is up without a contract, the team is forced to make a decision. Take the cap hit or cut the player. And this fateful day, the deadline was at 4 p.m. and negotiations had went on most of the day. And the options were for Elvis to accept the contract, sign and return it via fax machine, which is the league-mandated method of returning signed contracts when players are at a distance. Or the other option was to cut Elvis so the Broncos wouldn't take the cap hit. So 35 minutes before 4 p.m., Dumerville agreed to the new contract. But the problem was his agent was in Philly and he was in Miami. He needed to find a fax machine and do it quickly. So he set out looking for a Kinko's. Now, anyone who attended high school in the 90s or earlier knew about Kinko's. There were more than 850 stores across the United States in the late 90s, and everyone at that time knew it was the go-to place for copies, printouts, and, of course, fax machines. The problem was it was 2013, not 1998. Kinko's had been purchased by FedEx in 2004, and by 2008, there were no Kinko's left in the United States. All the stores were rebranded to FedEx Office. So Dumerville was looking for something that no longer existed. And when he finally found a fax machine, the fax of his signed contract arrived 6 minutes late. 6 minutes kept him from remaining a Bronco. The Broncos' hands were tied. They cut the star pass rusher at the deadline, and he went on to sign with the Baltimore Ravens, and he had a lengthy and prosperous career outside the Mile High City. Had he known that there were no longer Kinko's in existence, he may have saved himself those 6 minutes and retired as the Broncos sack leader and won a Super Bowl. Instead, his fax incident is the butt of many free agency jokes for nearly a decade. And that is your Mile High legend. Thank you for joining, and have a great day, Broncos fans.